Hi, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's Open Creative Space live stream. Here at Learn, we believe that making is what makes us human. We make, therefore we are. My name is Caroline Buteau, and I'm here with my tinkering colleagues, Chris Colley and Craig Bullitt. And for today's session, we will be exploring loose parts in an early childhood setting, both while playing indoors and outdoors. So I'm actually going to start this live stream with a story. I have a 4-year-old son, and just like any child, he really loves receiving gifts. And most oftentimes, he's going to be really interested in the box it comes in. Like, don't get me wrong, he's going to enjoy the gift, but when it's a commercial toy or something very specific, like a robot that makes a specific sound on the specific press of a button, that challenge or the novelty kind of wears out quickly because there's really no more room for challenge or imagination. So you can imagine there are boxes everywhere in my house. They're actually a permanent feature because those boxes leave so much room for imagination and creativity. And really no joke, he's going to spend countless hours, days, even weeks. I kid you not, years. This box is 2 years strong. And he's turned it into a car, a train, a castle. Yesterday it was a food truck, last week an elevator and a fridge. I absolutely love it. And it actually sparks curiosity. It allows his imagination to run wild. It promotes creativity as well. And you've probably noticed this yourself with kids too. And one of the best ways of doing just that, sparking imagination, creativity, challenges too, is through loose parts. Now, you're probably wondering, and I hear you asking, what are loose parts? It's not a piece of Lego that's lying around on the floor waiting to be stepped on. So loose parts were actually defined in 1971 by a British architect named Simon Nicholson. And he described loose parts as being open-ended materials that could be used and manipulated in many, many ways. So what does that mean? In a nutshell, loose parts are any materials that don't have one sole purpose or one specific set of instructions. And children can turn them into whatever they want. For example, a blanket could become a boat or a fishing pond. Rocks could become characters in a story. Mud, twigs, sticks could become ingredients for a recipe. I'm also thinking buttons, spools of thread, beads, rocks, leaves, anything really. And children can combine them, redesign them, line them up, take them apart, move them around. They could test hypotheses. They could learn motion. They could kind of categorize color, texture. There's endless ways. With loose parts, I can't stress this enough, we are shifting from product to process, and it's all materials and student-led. So I repeat this, and it's super important, there's not just one sole purpose for materials, but endless possibilities. And that's kind of a change of direction that can be really difficult for teachers, because the idea of a specific teacher-defined end product is often really, really deeply rooted, and it's very unconscious. But that shift in focus is going to be so worthwhile for your students. So having your students learn from playing with loose parts isn't going to happen overnight. It's something that happens over time, and it's going to become part of your routine. And we're here today to walk you through loose parts, share some tips and tricks, look at materials, storage ideas, your role as a teacher, as well as some pictures. So I'm going to pass the camera and mic to Craig, who's going to look at some materials with you.
Thanks, Carol. So let's look at some loose parts. So what do I need and where do I get it? Well, think about multi-purpose items, right? So that you want interesting textures and smells, just like the slide says. But my watch out at the bottom there is that parts have to be appealing, but they also have to be safe. So we're not going to get dangerous stuff. So obviously you'll start with the recycling bin. You can see our plastic containers, glass buckets, pots and pans, egg crates. Just watch out for the metal cans. Obviously, sometimes we'll file those down with some sandpaper or a file to make sure there's no sharp edges. And again, the point to take away here is watch out for those jagged edges and broken pieces. If things are broken, then remove them from your loose parts. Household items, another category. You can see all the beautiful brushes there. Some corks and clothespins, and even coins. If you're doing emerging literacy with money and counting and so on, the coins are fun to have. as an option. The workshop or the garage or the shed or whatever your atelier is that you have available to you. Tires are amazing, whether it's a car tire or bike, even inner tubes and toy tires and wheels are fantastic. Hardware, all the nuts and bolts and washers that fit together nicely. You can twist them and untwist them. Ropes and bungee cords, obviously, and then you can see some scraps of wood in the bin there. If you have leftover pieces of wood, those are amazing loose parts. And don't forget the senses, right? So sometimes we forget about the smell, touch, sound, and sight. So there's some amazing things with citrus and mint and cinnamon, some great things like that that'll evoke certain imagination and creative pieces from your young learners. And I like the paint wheel there also. So those are a fun thing for a treasure hunt. You can grab the paint wheel and go look for items in the schoolyard or around the school. You can find items that match those amazing colors. So a lot of possibilities to awaken the senses. And fasteners and connectors. There's a lot of things that we're going to have to put together and not necessarily with glue and tape and all that kind of stuff. So you can see some binder clips in there, push pins, elastics, obviously, and you'll recognize the bread closers, whatever you call them, the bread attachments and some twist ties, lots of possibilities. So again, in the images, you see things are nice and neat, nice and tidy. And so it's important to note that loose parts do not equal junk, right? It's not a junk bin. Loose parts are very, very functional. And we'll go back to Carol.
Thank you, Craig, for showing all those beautiful images and ideas of materials. I like that they're categorized. And I like to call materials the power of materials, and I can't stress that enough. Let students become familiar with the materials, the property of the materials, the gestures required to manipulate them, the different techniques and the tools that can be used kind of in conjunction with those materials. And I have a fun example. Actually, we had a consultant working with a group of kindergarten teachers, and they were shocked when the children were given each a ball of clay. So the children became, and I have the quote, they became primitive, primal little savages. They punched into the clay, they karate chopped it, they threw it on the table, they were loud and boisterous. And I love this because it became a creative mess, and it's a beautiful creative mess, which is perfect. You can't expect them to just pick up an unfamiliar material, become ninjas with that material and build something amazing or be creative. Give them time to manipulate that material to get to know it. And our instinct is, as teachers often, or parents, is to control this behavior so that it won't become a big creative mess with kids punching clay, karate chopping it. However, you really have to allow the children to explore in their own way, to become familiar with that material and the properties of the material. And I guarantee it will become a creative mess. However, the energy of the class will calm down once they're familiar with the materials, and then the kids will become focused and concentrated. And in turn, that material will offer endless possibilities of learning through playing with the loose parts. I'm going to send the camera back to Craig, who will show us some loose parts through his dot cam. On to you.
Thank you. So you can see some spectacular loose parts here, some rocks and discs and popsicle sticks and so on. And so important to note, also we mentioned the safety of them. In this case, for emerging literacy, I stuck some letters on these pebbles, and the pebble is spectacular even without the letter. I don't know if you can see there's holes through there. So there's a whole story going on with this pebble. But adding the letters and the numbers like here, you'll see emerging literacy take part also. They'll fit into the imagination and the story that's taking place. And this is actually a synthetic leaf. So the nature things are really spectacular to have, but they tend to disintegrate over time. So this one is actually a plastified leaf, just like this chestnut and these nuts and all that kind of stuff. And the nice thing about these, as you see them, they're washable, right? That's a super important thing right now, the hygienic part of it. So I could throw these all in a bin and rinse them underwater, and it's not going to impact them or damage them in any way. So something to think about when you're sorting out loose parts, and the importance of breaking them down into their smallest parts so that you'll recognize this from our reality over the past couple of years. This might have become a drop cloth, but again, if I were to give the students the mask or have a bin full of used masks, kind of disgusting. But if I take the pieces apart like that, here's some other examples. So the nose piece from those masks becomes a twist tie, right? But that's a much nicer presentation to have students work with. Same thing with the elastics. I took the elastics off the earpiece of those masks. This is a functional loose part. Again, we're trying to stay away from junk, and we're trying to use functional loose parts. We'll send it back to Caro.
Awesome, Craig. And what I really love about loose parts play is that it's really accessible for everyone. It could be free. You just go outside and have some nature walks, curriculum walks, and collect natural items outside. It could be donations. People love to donate when they're asked for things. Stores too, you can collaborate, or as simple as the dollar store to go grab a bin of beads or materials. And many children, they no longer have that opportunity to play with different types of materials, because every day for many of them is kind of synonym of commercial toys, electronic devices. So bringing that into your classroom is a really rich experience, and it creates a rich environment of loose parts. And children will likely discover multiple ways of manipulating the loose parts, new ways of thinking, and processing the knowledge that they learn while they're playing with those loose parts. Now, that's a lot of material in a classroom. We've looked at some ways of organizing it, so storage ideas, both indoors and outdoors. I'll pass it to Craig. I won't give it away, so let's go to Craig.
Thank you. So here you can see the typical egg crate. This is a perfect storage thing. And think about small storage or ways to transport stuff, especially for the learners. They should have their own way to organize things from the class bins, just so they stay organized and then they go back in the class bins in an organized way. But you get the idea. There's 12 compartments in there to carry little beads and so on, that kind of thing. This one is a way to get a little bit more organized. So I just have a shoebox in here. And what I've done is I created my own dividers to put in those shoe boxes. So you can just see pieces of cardboard. And in this case, with little ones, I didn't even need to measure or use a ruler in any particular way. What I did was, I'll try and show you what that looks like. I just took the cardboard up against the length of the box, and that's where I cut it. I marked it. And the same thing on the long side. I just did it that way, a piece of cardboard to measure my length without a ruler. And then you can see how I marked slots on the cardboard, and then they just slip together. And it's kind of trial and error. I didn't know how many sections I wanted. This will split the box in half. You can see me connecting those things. But so there you can see my dividers, kind of like an ice cube tray, and I'll put them inside the box. A lot of things moving around here. There you go. So that's for small storage or for just getting the students organized. And I mean, we can glue it, hot glue it, or hold it in place, but you can see how that would be a neat way to collect things from the classroom bins, keep them individually, bring them over to my desk, work with my project and so on, and then put them back in the classroom bins after. And I'll show you what those look like. So that's small storage for the students. Here's bigger stuff. So I have a lot of takeout material. So these things with lids are great. This is just a Tupperware bin with some beads in it. You can see they're nicely organized. Just a Ziploc bag there with my synthetic leaves. We have popsicle sticks just organized in a jar. More popsicle type sticks. This is a plastic jar, which is probably better for little folks so they don't fall and break. And then again, more of these containers, these takeout containers. And this is kind of a neat one. I think it might have been like a fishing tackle or for a sewing kit or something like that. It's just a neat container with nice sections in it. And we just put some sticks in there to keep them organized. So good for transporting, good for keeping it organized. And your student's shoebox, when they're done with their stuff can go back into the class bins, keep them organized. We put the lids on them, and then we can transport them and they flip over. We're not making a mess. And back to you, Caro. We'll have a look at what Chris has to say.
I really love your ideas, Craig, of recycling, repurposing, reusing, for example, the shoe boxes, because at LEARN, we're really strong advocates for repurposing, not just throwing things out. So it's very accessible. Like I'm sure parents have shoe boxes lying all around. jars, takeout containers that could be repurposed. So great idea. And it's important that materials of loose parts should always be presented in a beautiful, sorted, and organized way. We've actually observed that children will take out the materials, they'll make their creative mess, and then they will actually take pleasure in sorting all of those objects back into their containers, because children naturally tend to put them back in an organized way. You've probably observed this too, and it's not surprising because it's in their nature to kind of put order in things, to sort them, to create sequences with the objects and the loose parts in the classroom. So great ideas, Craig. That was kind of our indoor section of loose parts. Now we're going to go to Chris, who's going to share some ideas of materials and storage, and also some risk playing. So let's look at outdoor play with Chris.
Well, thanks, Carol. So yeah, I mean, Craig had a some great suggestions about the indoor. And it's not to say you can't take stuff from outside and bring it indoor, but you can't bring the big stuff inside. And the loose parts outside is really the big materials. Kind of as Carol was alluding to with her story about her son in her box. That these huge materials are really beneficial for the kids for manipulation, creativity, imagination, dexterity, etc. So we're going to look at a bit of that today. So loose parts outside. So the outdoors, think big. Think big materials. And we have so many recyclables and reusable materials that are at our fingertips that creating an inventory of loose parts for the outside is a relatively easy task. So you can see that from the pictures that, again, these are all like larger materials, messy, kids outside playing, creating, you name it. But why outside? Why? Well, there's space. They're connected back to nature a little bit more. And we all know our kids need more of that outdoor connection. They tend to build longer time periods too, over larger areas, which again, creates an environment where the kids are much more engaged with the loose parts because they're creating these lifelike artifacts or structures that are super fun to play with. So they build longer, wider, taller. And yes, this manipulation that happens over larger areas. So out in the schoolyard, or if you have a park near you, or any kind of outdoor area where you have space to roam. Not to say you can't do this in an urban environment as well. I mean, we all have our schoolyards, and you can see from this picture, this schoolyard has just a big bin of storage. I mean, they're kind of classified, the materials, but they are there available for the kids to go and take and start to build stuff with. So that's kind of a picture of an idea, and you can see the materials. I mean, these are like household materials, like tubes and gutters and all kinds of stuff that have just been thrown away. Now, some of the materials outside that you can play with, which I love, the number one is water. I mean, kids love water. They love to see it flow. They love to mix stuff in it. They love to add sticks and rocks and try to manipulate the flow, and et cetera, et cetera. So playing with water is a great loose part. Now, obviously, just having water, you can't, you need materials. So think about materials that you could get or have in your space or in your loose parts that will help with water, playing with water. So again, gutters, pipes, pots, pans, mud, all of these things, plus tools you need to mix things up. Maybe you need crates to create an inclined plane on for the kids so the water flows through. So again, lots of different ideas for water. And I mean, kids love water. They see a puddle, they want to jump in it. Water's fun. Also, natural materials. Now, Craig touched on some of these natural materials, and these, like I said, can be brought into the classroom without a problem. But there's also a thing about using larger pieces, larger sticks, larger rocks, where you might not want to bring all those into the school, but having them in their kits outside in your storage area, or wherever that might be, or in bins that the kids carry out and then carry back in. Again, it will depend on your environment, your situation, but they're very easy to manage. And you can see like some other ideas of these natural open-ended play materials, sticks, stones. It's great. I did last week, I got kids to actually go and find materials, and then we played with them together. So, I gave them a paper bag. I said they had to go find 5 different materials, put them in the bag. They had to fit in the bag. And then we came back into school and we played with the materials that we had found outside. So again, if you're looking to get started, it's a great way to start, because once you start looking around your environment more closely, you'll be surprised at what you can see. Now, I just love this quote and why we really do loose parts outside. Our children, preschool children, cycle 1, even cycle 2 students, they're inventors, they're safecrackers, and rebuilders of theories and behaviors that elude any presumptive or predictability of methods. Whoa, mouthful, yes. But kids they're not picky about what you give them. Whatever, they will find a way to use it and use their creativity to manipulate these into ways that you never even imagined. So oftentimes we say, give them the stuff and then get out of their way and ask them questions about what they're doing. And some of the preschool program that has just come out within the last couple of years, we're adding 2 more 60-minute periods or chunks of playtime for our youngest learners, our preschool. And oftentimes teachers are like, okay, well, I'm not really sure what to do in those situations. Well, loose parts would be a great avenue for some of that time where the intention is play, but you're giving them opportunities to explore various materials in a fun, exciting way for them. Now, there's also reusable and repurposed materials as well. I mean, as you can see, there's tons of different ones. I love milk crates. Kids love stacking them and playing them and hooking things up to them. They can create those slopes and angles you need. Wooden pallets, geez, wow. You can find them just about anywhere, and they're really great materials for building structures. So if kids want to build little houses, or they want to build a playing structure, amazing materials. Planks also, any kind of plank, old construction material. Now, like Craig said, you have to have a look at these materials first to make sure there's no rusty nails sticking in them, obviously. But once you've made them safe, launch them out to the kids and just kind of see what happens there. It's really quite amazing. And that all of this stuff is usually just thrown in a landfill or in the junk pile. Whereas kids see these as treasures, as endless hours of fun. And then think about recycling materials. Craig also touched on this. I mean, boxes are probably one of our favorite materials to play with. Big boxes, the bigger the better. And you can have one box and do 20,000 things with it. So I like that. Now, I want to leave you on one idea. And it's this idea of risky play. Now, we're thinking about kids outside with huge materials and construction materials, and oh my God, they're going to get hurt and fall. And well, risky play is super important for kids to experience. They need to figure out who they are and what their limits are as individuals. And the only way for them to do that is to experiment with being excited or thrilled or a little bit nervous about what they're going to do and doing it and overcoming that. This is a huge skill that these kids need to start to develop in these youngest years, in their early childhood. So don't interfere with their play don't intervene saying, oh, that might be too, maybe talk to them about it, ask a few questions. But if they fall, they fall. If they hit their head, they hit their head. There's always a lesson that can be had in each of these situations that happen. So I'm going to close with this. I'm alluding to teachers' role a little bit. To be a play teacher or observe play is exactly that. You create the environment and then you observe and see what happens and offer questions and support when needed. And play with the kids as well. It's a different kind of mindset, but it's a very powerful mindset, and it gets that whole child developed in preschool. So thanks for listening about outdoor stuff. I'll throw it back over to Calvin.
Thanks, Chris. I love that idea of creating this outdoor kind of backyard with recycled materials, tires, and tree stumps. Kids often prefer that to a commercial playground because, for example, a slide has one sole purpose, going up and down. whereas a tire could become anything. A tree stump, outdoor is amazing. So as a teacher, you might be wondering, like, what is my role in this? How can I facilitate playing with loose parts in my classroom? Your main role is really, like Chris and Craig touched upon, to document, to observe, to interact with them. Remember, it's an iterative process, so it takes time. It becomes embedded in your routine. And your role as a teacher is kind of take the time to document and reflect on the process to help you design the next explorations with your students. And if possible, we suggest that teachers could work as a team with other teachers in their school, kind of to bounce observations and ideas off of each other. About documenting, we like documenting the process and not just the product. What's fun about loose parts is that they're ephemeral. So children really learn to enjoy making things, creating things, playing, then they let them go. And those products and the process can live on in the pictures or videos that you take as a teacher. Also, as Chris mentioned, like there's no expected outcome. Teachers naturally become observers, and what you can do is ask questions or make observations. And instead of asking, what are you doing right now? You could, for example, provide vocabulary. Like for clay, I see that you pinched that clay. Can you show me how you do that? Or you made imprints in the clay. What else could you do with it? So open-ended questions for the students. And my final reflection, when children are allowed to play freely with no outcome or end product in mind, there's no mistakes. They cannot make mistakes. So it's fun to tinker, to play, to be creative. And when they encounter problems, they'll learn to solve them themselves through that exploration. So as adults, teachers, or parents, we have to learn from refraining from solving those problems for the children. Like Chris said, you just observe them. That's it for today. We hope you enjoyed this live stream. You can find all of our recordings on the Learn Quebec YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and keep an eye for our next Open Creative Space live stream. Bye, everyone.